Check me out. Look, I know perfect timing feels like I'm too late. And I know I'm still great in spite of my mistakes. You know it's authentic every rhyme I say.
Hey, what's going on, PTM family? I didn't say yo-yo that time, and now I'm like, I need to announce that I didn't say yo-yo. But anyway, what's going on, PTM fam? Welcome to another episode. I think we're on like 10 now. Welcome to another episode of Perfect Time Multisport. Today, I have my friend Sarah with us.
Hey.
She's joining us at the PTM family. I'm really excited to hear more about her story. If folks don't know Sarah, she is a member of District Triathlon. And when I initially met her, she was just great energy. She just had great energy, just a great person to be around. And I just always loved her personality. So I was like, hey, Sarah, you have a story, and I want to make sure I share that story with my community, especially as this community builds. So I am really excited to make sure you all learn a bit more about her through this process. However, for the folks that don't know you, Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, one, where you're from, where you're at now, and what are you passionate about, or as other folks would say, what do you do?
I am from Connecticut, mostly by way of California and Ohio. I'm a teacher, a special education teacher. So preschool, pre-K4, and kindergarten special ed over in Southeast DC.
Right.
And I'm currently in DC.
Cool. How long have you been teaching?
This is my 9th year. It's
So
all I've ever done since I graduated college.
All right, cool. So when you aren't spending time teaching, what are you doing?
Quarantine got me into woodworking. So I've been making like patio furniture, built-in bookshelf, passionate about Bravo TV.
Bravo TV? All right.
And my dog.
Yeah. So do you have any like favorite TV shows?
Any of the Real Housewives.
The Real Housewives. I did not see that coming.
I don't like drama in my life. I like to watch it on TV.
All right. I'm kind of judging. I don't even know how to transition to the next question. So I also know that athletics is a big part of your life, right? So how are you moving these days?
Trying to stay active and prepared for racing whenever it comes back.
That's real.
Currently kicked out of all the pools because they're all so close.
Yeah.
So kind of living the like duathlon life.
Same.
Yeah.
So again, talking about athletics is a big part of your life now. Has that always been the case, where you're always like this athletic person as a child?
Kind of. I'm like the jack of all trades and the master of none.
All right.
I've done like t-ball, softball, soccer, gymnastics, like everything that all little kids do, but all of it for like a year.
Okay.
So I never really got great at anything.
All right.
And then volleyball in high school.
Volleyball in high school. So how were you actually broken in to like this world of athletics?
My roommate in college is the one who got me into running. My dad got me into triathlon.
Okay.
And I think just parents trying to get their kids' energy out got me into all the other sports.
All right. So what is the first sport you remember playing?
I remember playing soccer, and you know when you're like 6 and you play soccer, they put you in all of the positions to like try them out. And I remember playing goalie, and I got kicked in the stomach with a ball. I remember all of the things that like caused me to leave a sport. So I got kicked in the stomach with a ball playing goalie, and I quit soccer. I cartwheeled off the balance beam in gymnastics, so I quit gymnastics. So yeah.
All right. Cool. So what was the first sport that actually stuck?
Volleyball.
Volleyball. All right.
And the funny thing about volleyball is I picked it because I did not like running. And I knew it required the least amount of running because you were contained within half of the court.
Yeah. All right. So when did you start playing?
My freshman year of high school.
All right. Cool.
Looked at kind of like all the list of sports that I felt like you could play without having done for like 10 years as a kid.
Yeah.
Volleyball was one of them because we didn't have a youth volleyball program. And then just kind of stuck.
All right. And where'd you go to high school?
In Newtown, Connecticut.
In Newtown, Connecticut. Cool. Where's that? I've never been in Connecticut, but like, let's put me in the middle of New York City.
Yes.
How far is it?
You drive out of New York City for about an hour and 15 minutes.
Really? All right, so it's really close. All right, cool. So did you spend a lot of time up in New York?
Yes.
All right.
It was like the dream when I was
Would that be considered down? Yeah, that would be considered down in New York.
Down.
All right, cool. So up for us, down for you at that time.
Yep.
All right. So volleyball is a big part of your life. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that. how you started playing as a freshman? What positions did you play?
I was a setter for the entire time. I played the freshman team my freshman year, JV team my sophomore year, and then varsity my junior and senior year.
Okay.
Good.
You were pretty good?
We were pretty good. I was pretty good. But we made it to like states our last 2 years. We were like 16-0 my senior year. We were a really tight squad.
Yeah. All right. Cool. I like that. So did you transition and play in college?
No, I didn't know what it was going to be like balancing anything in college, so I didn't have any dreams of like doing sports. I was like, let me make sure I get my grades.
Right.
So I did that, and my roommate in college was a runner.
Yeah.
And so she made it her mission to try to make me a runner.
All right.
That was quite a mission. I did not make it easy for her.
Where'd you go to school?
Clemson, South Carolina.
Clemson. So you're up in Newtown, Connecticut. You grew up there, New York, so you got NYU, you have all these different schools up in New York State. How'd you end up all the way in South Carolina?
So my whole extended family's from the West Coast.
Yeah.
We lived in the Midwest for like 6 years, but then we moved to the Northeast, so the South was kind of like the only area I hadn't explored.
Alright.
And then my brother had gone to UVA, and I had seen how he had like that big university sports, like big state school experience, and I wanted to have that too.
Okay. Alright. So was that like the only school did you know you were going there, or?
No, it was between that and Boston University.
Okay.
Because it was a big like city school.
Yeah.
And so I had dreams of cities and that, and then finally decided Clemson was the one.
All right, cool. So taking a step back, I know that you played in high school. You had this pretty good team. You were undefeated as a senior. So it seems like athletics were a really big part of your high school journey, but it wasn't involved in your college journey, right? So what helped you get in that transition as an athletic person now being in college as a young adult?
So high school, it was such a big deal. That was like how you make your friends. It's like such a big part of forming who you are. College, you're just kind of trying to figure out who you are. And then transitioning into being like a young adult, it was like a great way to meet people and stay healthy and stay active and keep your mental health up.
All right. You say your roommate was a big ambassador of the sport of running. Cool. I like that. So how did it feel to actually become a runner? Or, as you answer that question, did you even consider yourself being a runner at that point?
No, I'm going to have to tell her to listen to this because this was like her mission for like 3 years in college. So my freshman year, I kind of like ran around campus to try to stay fit and like blow off some steam. And then my junior year is the year that she convinced me to try and like sign up for some races and start training for some races.
Okay.
And I was like, I'm gonna go for a run. I run. She was like, yeah, you're a runner. I was like, I'm not a runner. I'm a person who sometimes runs. I might try to race and I might do some things, but I'm not a runner.
Yeah.
And it took me a really long time to embrace the idea of being a runner because I felt like I didn't fit what I picture a runner being.
All right. So what did you picture being a runner being at that point, and what do you picture being a runner being now?
I think at the time it was like runners look a certain way, runners eat certain things, runners that like your life is running, everyone you're with is a runner. And then I would say I don't think I really considered myself a runner until I got out of college. But now, like if I was to tell anyone what a runner is, it's anyone who runs.
Yeah.
If you've embraced that as a part of your lifestyle.
So do you feel like you had to battle or just navigate through some imposter syndrome as now a runner, or now as you look back, you can say I am a runner?
Absolutely, yeah. I think I just didn't see me as this like super fit person who eats all these like fruits and vegetables all the time and only talks about running and all my friends are runners, but yeah, definitely imposter syndrome.
Okay. So I know that the lessons that we learn in sport, right, they don't only apply when we're actually in the activity, but we can apply those to life in general. So I'm curious, do you feel like this imposter syndrome or just self-doubt as a whole played a role in your life, period, right? And how your lessons in athletics help navigate through that imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I think once I embraced the idea of being a runner, then there was like this other breakthrough of trying to get into like being willing to try groups. Some people just like seem so naturally to like fit into like running running groups and triathlon teams and all these things. And then that was like another hurdle for me because it was like, well, if I show up, what if I'm the slowest one there? I don't want to hold anyone back. Like, how do you just like bust into a team and be like, I'm part of your team now, like we're teammates? You know, like in high school, it's like you build that team together, but like as an adult, it's a little more fluid, so people come and go, and that there was a lot of anxiety around like how much of an athlete do you have to be to get into a team, which is like that was another level of imposter syndrome.
Yeah. So thinking about how much of an athlete, we know the first step is actually taking the first step when we think about running, but thinking about that next step, which is like the race and the goals and actually becoming a quote unquote runner. Can you talk about some of your first experiences and just memories that you have as a runner or within races?
My first race was the Spinks Half Marathon in Greenville, South Carolina.
Okay.
And then did the Hartford Half after that.
When was it?
2011. And that's when I think I finally embraced the idea of being a runner, and I was like, well, that's all runners have to do. Now we have to try to run a marathon. And when I was training for that, I got injured, and that started like a long plague of an undiagnosed injury.
What was the injury?
It turned out to be like a hip impingement with a labral tear.
Gosh, so how'd you just battle through that? Because you just mentioned that it was an undiagnosed injury, so tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I was finally decided I was going to do that marathon, and I was like doing a really decent job for a first timer, like trying to train, and I got to my 15-mile training run and started having pain that actually started in my knee and just kind of like radiated up into my hip. And then kept pushing and kept running, and then finally just got to the point where like it was getting shorter and shorter distances where I could run without pain. And so I went to a doctor, and the first doctor I went to actually was this old man, and he told me, he was like, well, if you stop running, then it'll be fine. Like, if the pain only comes when you run, if you just stop, then it's fine. I was like, I'm 21 years old, I'm like doing this thing that's so healthy for me, and you're telling me we'll just stop. So I saw a different doctor, and they were doing MRIs and x-rays, and they couldn't find it, and then finally I went to my first triathlon. I relayed an Olympic triathlon with my dad and my brother, and they had an ART therapist there, and he was like doing a pre-race massage, and you know they asked like, do you have any injuries? And I told him, I was like, yeah, but nobody knows what it is. And I
people know what it is. Just not
so good luck. Then I explained it to him. He was like, oh, you definitely have a labral tear. You should go get an MRI with dye. And then sure enough, I got an MRI with dye. That's what it was.
Gosh.
I was like, oh, I wish I had met you like 3 years ago.
So all this time you're just battling through running and becoming a runner, and you just had this injury.
Yeah, which I mean, I guess it's like the best way to introduce someone to being a runner is getting hurt.
So were you ever working with someone? I know you had your friend, but did you ever have like run coaches in your life?
I did it all on my own. When I first moved up to DC after graduating, I dabbled with like attempting some different teams, but none of them ever really stuck.
Yeah,
so I was just kind of doing it by myself. I don't know. They just never really were like my vibe. It was it's like a good team. I think is one that you want to keep going back to.
Right.
And it was like I wanted to meet people, but I didn't really want to keep going back.
That makes sense.
So yeah, it didn't stick.
And when did you actually come to the DMV area? I'm just curious.
The winter 2011.
Okay. All right. Cool. I love that. So before I get into my next question, as always, I want to make sure I let folks that are listening live know. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. We have Danny here. That is one of the incentives to joining live. And as I always remind folks, if you're watching or listening to this later, like what is he talking about? As I always say, you should have been here. But getting into that next question and thinking about that athletic journey, I know you're not only a runner, right? You do these things called triathlon. So can you tell me how did you hear about the sport? And let's go with that.
So my dad got into triathlons. He said he like saw a bulletin up at the gym or something, and it was like, try training for a triathlon. He was like, all right, why not? And I like came home from some break at college and was like, what's going on? He's like, well, I'm training for a triathlon. I was like, what? Like, who are you? And what is a triathlon? I didn't know what it was. So my dad was the one who got me into it.
All right. So what are some of your first memories as a triathlete?
The very first one would be seeing him do his first triathlon, which was kind of scary. It was almost like a role reversal controversial, like he was 50 something maybe at the time, and I was like 21, so I was thinking I knew everything, and it's like, I'll join him for part of the run, see how he's doing, and like he was really pushing it, and it was kind of scary to like see your parent like putting themselves through that much like physical exertion. I was like, are you okay? Like, are you gonna make it? So my first impression was kind of like, this is a torture thing that people put themselves through. But then I think like seeing how much it brought to him and his life, I was like, well, I want to try this.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. See, that's like such a big part of it is like your first memory is not really even about you. Like, I don't even know how to follow up with the question, which is really great that we have a question from the chat. So, Danny, can you please let us know?
So, Brittany wants to know if you've ever had a moment in your training where you were just over it. If so, what were you training for? And is there a motto or saying or song that you use to get through these moments?
And if it's about AC, let's hold off because we are going to get into that.
Well, I was going to say, I think every training block I've hit a point where I'm over it. Usually right around the middle when the miles start to get high, but the race doesn't feel like it's that close.
Yeah.
And I think I usually just try to draw on like that finish line feeling.
That's real.
Who's going to be there? How am I going to feel? Will I PR? Just like that, the goal.
All right. So to the second part of, or the back end of Brittany's question was, do you have like a training mantra just in general?
I don't. When my dad was training for an Ironman, it was right around the time that there was the San Diego school shooting. That was my elementary school. And someone had told him that he should think of one of the victims for every mile, because it was like 26 victims of the shooting.
Oh, yeah.
And I've heard other people say that before too, of like dedicating miles to people as you race. So I think when the going gets very thick, I try to like think of people that make it a little more meaningful than just like me out here doing this athletic thing.
It's important. It's definitely important. So sticking on actually the Sandy Hook point for a second. I know you're a teacher now, so I'm curious, like, how does showing up to work every day feel for you, knowing that you had this community that was heavily impacted by this tragedy, and now you're essentially doing the same thing that this community had to go through?
It's really interesting because I feel like on the one side, there was like that huge event, and I remember like coming back to school after it first happened and being like, all right, where are the locks on these doors? Like, what would I do if this was me and my students? But then on the flip side, the community where my kids, like my students live, is affected by gun violence every day. So it's kind of like a balancing act of, I feel like the whole country constantly goes through. We have these big mass shootings, but then we also have these other underlying issues. So it's kind of been like that balance ever since. And I think that like just adds another layer of purpose to being a teacher. Like if I'm working with my students and can hopefully help them have a better future where if they're a teacher, they don't have to think about those things.
Yeah, I love that. Definitely didn't want to just skip over that. So I appreciate the question. I appreciate you acknowledging that. So we can definitely talk about that a little bit. But getting back into the triathlon space, I know that you have your dad as a resource, but curious about other resources that you have as far as the community and as far as like anybody else in your life. Do you think about folks in the triathlon space?
So it was my dad was a big one, and then now I have District Tri, which is like such a big part of my life. It took me a really long time, like I was saying, to come around to the idea of being on a team and like kind of giving into the whole community thing, because it's that imposter syndrome. But ever since I've been with District Tri, that's been a huge one.
All right.
That's how we met.
It is. I know. It is. So I know we have a question in the chat, but I am curious about how you got to that coming to join the District Tri. But before we get into that conversation, I do want to hear the questions in the chat.
So we have two questions. I'm going to start with the first. What's your favorite and least favorite thing about triathlons? Brianna wants to know.
Favorite thing. I think one of my favorite things is that you can train for tries and it doesn't beat your body up quite as much as running did. As an injury-prone athlete, I think that's very helpful to me. Least favorite for a really long time was the open water swim. Now I'm going to be a little more specific and say the middle-aged men in the open water swim. They get a little feisty.
what's a middle-aged man?
You're not there yet.
All right, I'm like, where am I at in my life?
You're not there yet. And especially if you're asking yourself, like, is that me? Then you're not there yet.
All right, cool. So before we get to the next question, I am curious, when you talk about your least favorite, can you talk a little bit about that open water swim experience for you? How has it become your least favorite?
So my very first open water swim experience was actually okay. I got in an open water swim in a sprint, having never been in an open water swim before, and just did it.
Okay.
And managed to make it out okay. Then fast forward to when I had taken a break from tries and I came back and I took another hack at a sprint, and I was wildly undertrained for it, but I was like, oh, it's just a sprint, and I really disrespected the distance.
Yeah.
And I think it was vertigo, but I think it was vertigo brought on mostly by like a panic attack, where it was just like I didn't feel like I could figure out which way it was up, couldn't catch my breath, I couldn't slow my heart rate down. Made it out, but I just actually checked the standings on athletes earlier today, and I think I was like 6th from last overall because it was like such an adventure in the water. And then I know we'll talk about it later, but fast forward all the way to now, and I love the open water.
All right.
It's been a long journey. It's like 8 years
I love
to get
it.
there.
I love it. All right. So we have the next question.
I've got to say that I love that you prepared for today by
I know.
going into athletes and checking your times for your tries.
I was going to ask that, but it's like, all right.
I
we'll
was
just
never
let her
like
live.
Dory. I had to refresh my memory.
So we have 2 more questions. Jason wants to know, have you found any lessons through triathlon that you can use with teaching?
That's a good question. I didn't have that written down, so I really appreciate that question, Jason.
Ooh, I bet there's some really good ones that I'm not going to be able to think of right away. Definitely just never giving up.
Yeah.
I think what's really important that a lot of teachers, if you're not putting yourself in new experiences, can miss on is we ask kids to take risks in school all the time because they're learning new things, and we're just generally asking them to like go outside of their comfort zone.
Right.
But if we're not going outside of our comfort zone, we can forget what that feels like and how scary and vulnerable that is. So getting to experience being scared and vulnerable as an adult and being able to draw on that feeling and kind of like help coach kids through that, I think has been a big one. Because otherwise it can be so easy as an adult to just be like, well, just try.
Yeah.
Trying is scary.
Yeah. I love that. So getting back, actually thinking about the community that that you became a part of, I love how they're showing up for you in this conversation. But thinking about them, how after going on all these dates, whether it's good and bad dates with clubs, how did you come to the decision that District Trial was like the partner that you wanted?
I did some research.
You did some research?
I did, yes, as you can tell from me researching myself on athletes, I can get into research. To like wind it back a little bit, where I grew up was super duper white, and when I moved down to college, I was trying to explicitly expose myself to diverse situations by going to a big school in an area I wasn't from. And I had some like diverse experiences, but then moving up to DC, it's like such a diverse city in so many ways.
Yeah.
I wanted to be very intentional about picking communities and things that I got involved in that allow me to like take advantage of how diverse DC is and build like a diverse community around me. And that, as I'm sure you know, is very hard in triathlon. So fortunately, I found District Tri, and District Tri was exactly what I was looking for.
All right, I love that. So what's been your favorite memory of your journey through it with District Tri to this point?
Atlantic City half last year.
All right, last year in 2019, right?
Yes.
All right, cool. Danny, are you raising your hand for a question? Y'all can't see her, but she's like, hey, what the hell? Because we had signs and everything. Like we got no cars, but we actually had signs, and she just back there like, hey. I'm like, all right. So Danny, do you have a question?
We do. So DPR Kids Camp Scoop or Co-op wants to know, which person have you learned the most from in your community from District Triathlon?
Can't answer that.
That's a hard one.
No, everybody, yeah.
I feel like everybody.
I'm like, no.
I feel like I should say one of you.
feel like there was another part of that question. We good? All right, cool. Thank you for that question, DC, DPR kids. Appreciate that. So getting back to that AC, I have a bunch of questions around Ironman Atlantic City. I knew this was our favorite. I was there, and I'm really curious to hear a bit more about that experience. So, want to hear from the registrations, the training. Can you tell us a little bit about how you, when you decided to go through that, how you decided to choose that race, and tell us the progression through.
Yeah. I think I chose a longer race partially because I think the challenge in a lot of triathlon for me is the distance, because I enjoy going for longer distances because it's tangible and I have a very hard time getting faster. So rather than focusing on time goals, I like trying to go longer. And I finally reached the point where an Olympic felt pretty comfortable, even though it was slower, it was comfortable, and I knew I could do that distance, so I was ready to move up. And as a lot of things work in teams, just put it out in the chat, and I was like, so I'm thinking about this, who else is on? And it was perfect that so many people seemed to be in similar places of like ready to try their first half.
Yeah.
And we all really got on board with the idea that it was flat, it was fast,
Yeah.
it was low, it was close enough-ish that no one needed airplane tickets, so that helped with like financial factors. Yeah.
All right.
And once everyone else was on board, then there was no backing out.
All right. So what was training like, since you had all these people that bought into the idea of doing this with you? What was that training for it like?
It was great. Every Saturday morning we would all meet up early at Haynes Point and do long bike rides. And by meet up, like start time was 6 and we'd all get there by 6:45. We'd all have
Daniel.
Yep. We'd all have breakfast together afterwards. A lot of us would get up sometimes on Sundays and do long runs to do that like back to back, kind of like spread out brick. And I think having like physical meetups and then also just people who were all gearing towards doing the same thing on the same day was crucial.
Yeah.
And also just like funny that, of course, now my favorite memory is something on a team when I was like so resistant to teams as a middle.
That makes sense. So this all sounds great, but I am curious because I do know that, you know, as we progress as athletes, as people, everything just isn't great. So I'm curious, leading up to the race, what were some challenges you had to endure?
I have never loved the bike, and it's because I don't spend very much time on the bike. So I really had to spend a lot more time on the bike to try to get myself comfortable with it and get my speed up. That was the only segment of the race that I was slightly concerned about, the cutoffs. And when people would ask me about my race, they were like, are you ready? I'm like, I'm ready as long as I don't get a flat tire. Which was foreshadowing.
Yes.
But I was like, I knew I could finish that bike as long as there were no hiccups. If there were hiccups, it was going to be close.
All right, cool.
And it was close.
So as long as you don't get a flat tire, but we're going to get into that. But I know we have some questions in the chat.
How did you dial in on your training, on your nutrition during training, and is there anything you would have changed?
Nutrition-wise, that was a big thing that my dad had hammered down, because he actually got a nutritionist when he was Ironman training and was telling me about all of the benefits of, and then he would just share all the information. But because of the teacher, I don't have the money for a nutritionist, so Google was my best friend. I just did a lot of more research.
Yeah.
And I think that's the benefit also of the team. We were all talking about things that we shared, nutrition things we tried. I got really into Uncrustables on the bike.
Yeah.
Now I can't eat them without tasting Atlantic City. But yeah, Google experimentation, and oddly, like when I train more, I do better with nutrition. It's like I'm like fully in like training and preparedness mode, and then like if I'm not training for something is when my nutrition tends to be the worst.
Right. Okay. So as you were answering that question, you talked a little bit about your budget and being a teacher, right? So I do recognize that as being a barrier, not only for races, but the sport as a whole. So I'm curious, how would you, taking a few steps back, how would you navigate through that and actually prepare a budget so it wasn't as much of a barrier to you?
Yeah, I got my bike that I still ride when I was a junior in college, and it was a closeout Fuji from Performance Bike.
Okay.
It was like $600, I saved up some money from like summer jobs and was like, I'm gonna commit to this thing.
Yeah.
And then really like limited the number of races that I could do. Tries, it's like doing 3 running races at once, so it's like, well, I can only do about a third of the races that I would do if I was running. And just, yeah, I was very, very strict about the budgeting.
All right, so did you actually have a budget, or was it just something you kept in mind?
It was kind of like everything else in my life was very budgeted, and whatever was left was for triathlon was on the receiving end of.
That's right.
Yeah, and I still have that bike to this day.
All right.
Because it's kind of like either buy a new bike that you can't race, because
Right.
now you have no money to race,
Nice.
or keep the bike and race.
That's real. All right. So was that the same bike that you raced with in Atlantic City?
Same bike, same tires.
Same bike, same tires.
Lesson learned.
So tell us.
If there's any bike mechanics who watch this, they're gonna be like, well, she set herself up.
Listen, I've been riding. I've been actually coaching and like doing all this stuff. I literally, for the first time, just got like a maintenance and a bike fit this past week.
Yeah.
So I don't get it, but I love, as Matt at District Cycle Works has said, I just have this innocence to the sport. And I just love it, and like I don't want to think about the stuff that has to go into actually preparing.
No,
It's
so
weird.
much.
Like,
And actually, when I brought my bike in for a tune-up right before Atlantic City, the bike mechanic was asking like why I was bringing it in. I told him what I was doing. He was like, "You're gonna ride that for a half?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." And also, like, it's comments like that help keep people out of this sport. Like, keep your judginess to yourself and let me ride this giant hunk of steel.
I know.
As I clap in the background.
We always have a crowd. Our producer is like our live audience. But all right, so fast forwarding up to well, not fast forwarding, but getting back to Atlantic City. Tell us about your race day experience.
Okay, so the day before the race, we went to the expo and everything, and I got 2 extra tubes for my bike. And I remember when I was checking out, the guy was like, "Oh, you really don't trust these streets, huh?" And I was like, "No, I don't. I have trust problems, especially when it comes to mechanical things on the bike." And I loaded both tubes up in my bag, which like they barely fit. And then the morning of the race was thunderstorming, so the swim got delayed. And as it ends up turning out, the race had every kind of weather you could possibly have. It stormed for the swim, it downpoured for the bike, and then it was blazing hot for the run.
That's crazy, yeah.
Then the swim finally started off, which was great because I think if we didn't have the swim, I would have wanted to do another one just because I could have the full experience because I'm stubborn like that. And the swim, like I was saying earlier, was like one of my favorite open water swims ever. I had done Tri-AC Olympic like a month before in that same body of water, and it was not wetsuit legal. It was wetsuit optional, but I wanted to have a test run just in case AC wasn't wetsuit legal.
Yeah.
And it was salt water, and I had never swum in salt water, so I wasn't sure how I was going to do to that. So I had done a swim in that body of water before, and so I felt very comfortable there, and that was like my first great open water swim. I was just like comfortable. I got into like a zen. Jason, who asked a question earlier, had told me the tip of just count to 100 over and over and over again to like settle in. And I counted to like 500 and settled in.
All right.
Yeah.
I love that. So I do have some more questions thinking about race day, but I know we have a question in the chat. So Danny, can you let us know what that is?
Yes, Fry B Runnin' wants to know, is there any interest, and this question is not directly related to AC specifically, so I'm going to insert that part. Is there any interest for in creating opportunities for your students to learn more about multisport and having the chance to participate?
Yes. And I think that is where we see a lot of the difficulties and issues that we have with triathlon is it's so expensive. And it's just, there's also other barriers, like with swimming, obviously. I looked into starting just like a recreational tri team for kids who my school who would be interested. And it was just like the idea of having to find bikes, having to get time at the pool. I'm not a certified swim coach, so either getting someone who's certified to be like water safe to come and like reserve pool time. And I think like when you start looking at all of the things you have to do, especially for kids, there's a lot of barriers. Not to
definitely want to talk a little bit more about that as we get to the end. But yeah, gotta bring the community in.
Yes.
I know that's a big part of what you're doing, so I definitely want to make sure we leave some time for that. But getting back to your race day, tell us about some things you had to just navigate through during the race. I know you had this nickname of Flats. How did you get that?
So after the water got out, the Atlantic City race you like on a old airport field, I think, and then you get off and you go ride on the highway. So I got out of the field on my bike and turned onto the highway and already saw like people just like all over the road. Like it was like a zombie apocalypse. Like people just like and their bikes just flats on flats on flats. And so already I was like, oh dear. Because in the back of my head I had that thought that like everyone kept asking me like, are you ready? And it was yes, as long as I don't get a flat. So I made it 10 miles before I heard my first pop.
How long is the bike course for folks that don't know?
50.
Actually, how long is all the distances for folks that aren't aware?
Yeah, the swim was 1.2 miles.
Okay.
The bike was 56, and then the run was 13.1.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're 10 miles into this 56-mile bike ride, and
Felt my first pop.
all right.
And I swore because I knew exactly what had happened. And pulled the bike over, like kept trying to pedal, and I was like, maybe it was just like me being like nervous.
Yeah.
And I like kept looking over to see, and sure enough, like I just saw it getting flat. I was like, great. So I pulled over and started trying to fix it myself. But fortunately, at that point, there was a bike sag support who came by. They fixed it for me a lot faster than I could have. Replaced it. I got on, and I want to say it was like not even a couple miles before the back tire went. And I was like, damn.
Gosh. So now you're using both of these tubes. Did you have any other tubes left? Or?
No, so I had the two, and they had already made fun of me for having the two. So I'm already ahead of myself. Have the two, so now that second one is gone.
Yeah.
And like before everyone asks, yes, we ran our fingers around the inside. Like yes, we made sure there was nothing else in there because after I told people about this experience, it was of course this long list of things that I had done wrong that I couldn't.
Yeah.
So then the back one went. Immediately after the back one, the front one went again. And that one of bike sack support, I had to like wait through a couple iterations of bike sack support because there were so many people flatting that they were running out of tubes.
Wow.
And then finally, the fourth one goes by like mile 27, and I had no tubes and I had half a cartridge of CO2. So I would like pull over, inflate it a little bit, go as fast as I could. Pull over, inflate it a little bit, go as fast as I could, and then by mile 28 ran into Jason from District Tri and also bike sack support. And Jason fortunately had two spare tubes and spare CO2, and he was just like the fairy godmother of that race day, and honestly saved the race for me because it was getting very close.
I can imagine. And I know we have a few questions in the chat, but I do want to make sure I get to finish up with this because I am curious. Why was it so important? You know, you were having 4 flats at this point. I know I personally would have just been like, forget this. And I want to make sure I just say forget this because I know your students will be watching this later. So,
I know what you're thinking though.
I know personally I would have just like checked out, but it was important for you to keep going. Why was it so important for you?
Yeah, I mean that was first of all, I've never DNF'd a race before. I've gotten very close. I've been closer to last than I realized, like when I checked the links. And I had never DNF'd, and I was like, my only main goal was to finish.
Yeah.
And so like if at some point I was like, if I have to carry this bike on my back, because I know you just have to finish with the machine you start with. If I have to finish with it on my back, if I have to walk it, like whatever, as long as I finish this thing that I started with. And the other thing I had was, I was like, well, if it's beyond my control, like if it just reaches the point where I can't go any faster in this time frame, like they're gonna just have to pull me off the course. So that when people ask how it went, I can be like, I went until they wouldn't let me go anymore.
That's real. I love that. Yeah. So thinking about all that, a lot has to be going on in your mind during this process. So did you have a mantra during this race?
Just keep going. I wouldn't worry.
Yeah.
Just keep riding, and hopefully you'll come across someone who can help.
All right.
Yeah.
simple. So Dory with the memory and Dory with the function. All right, cool. So Danny, we have questions in the chat?
You know, you've answered quite a bit of what folks have been asking about, minus one question for Friday Running. He would like to know.
Who's Friday running today? Because he's asking all these questions. I'm just
My other half. I'm not going to say my better half because we're equal.
all right.
So you're getting applauded for your perseverance and your mental strength through staying on the course after such serious challenges with the bike. Joel wants to know if you cried and if quitting actually crossed your mind, which I think you expressed a little bit.
He asked that because he knows I hate to cry. I don't think I did. I think I was more in like a state of like anger that things were beyond my control, even though I had done as much as I could to prevent it.
Yeah.
And at that point, it was just like I was thinking about the fact that it was possible that I might not finish, but I hadn't like fully accepted the idea that a DNF was inevitable. So yeah, I don't think I cried, but I think had I been dragged off the course, then I would have.
I love that. Yeah. All right. So all through this conversation, right, we talked about the importance of one, finding the community, and then once you have that community, how important that is to you, and then also in the race, DT Jason actually showing up for you in that space. I'm actually a bit curious. Why is showing up for DT in a space like DT so important for you? And District Triathlon, I'm sorry.
I think any good team is made of like give and takes. Like there's the times you're going to be the athlete, and then there's the times you're going to be the support. And it's not as fun to be the athlete if you never have the support. So I feel like District Tri has been it's had those good like give and takes. Like there's people when they're not racing who show up for you when you are. And yeah, I mean, it was like such a long adventure together that it was great to like culminate it with so many people who came, both racing and supporting. And it was nice to just have like that celebration at the end.
Yeah. I love that. So I know earlier in the conversation we were talking about how you wanted to make sure you inserted yourself in like these super diverse spaces, in particular spaces that are predominantly led by Black and brown folks. And I also know that you also have a lot of those same communities as a teacher. I'm really curious about how do you show up in these spaces while continuing to remain both responsible, respectful, and authentic as a member of these communities?
I think something I was very apprehensive about when I first joined District Tri was like knowing that it was a team that was for Black and brown people primarily, knowing that like that's not my space. Like I certainly wanted to respect that I'm like a guest in a space of a community within a community that needs like that strong bond, because it's so, I can only imagine it's so hard to be someone who is so underrepresented in the community like triathlon. So going in, making sure that I was just kind of like, I'm here to support in all the ways that I can support and do all the things that I can do, knowing that like I'm already getting so much out of it by being a member of this team. So making sure that like I never really felt like it would be appropriate for me to be like on the board or in any leadership positions, because of the whole mission of District Tri is to elevate the voices of Black and brown people. Like, why should I be? But then also, like, that is a true, genuine community of mine that I love. So making sure that I'm like putting in as much as I'm getting out, if not more. Both by like showing up as like a friend and a teammate, and showing up when people have like rides and group rides.
And a podcast guest.
Yeah.
So I love that. So staying on the topic of these PLC spaces, we all know that National Reckoning on Black Lives Matter is showing up in all of our lives quite a bit, right? So I'm curious, how is it showing up in one, your professional space, to your athletic space, and then finally in your mental health space?
In my professional space, it's like always been the main theme.
Right.
My school's like the mission of our school is to basically attempt to level the opportunity gap for kids based on the education you receive for the zip code where you live. So that's kind of always been there. I think now the question is who's leading the school through that. And again, another space I don't think that I or people who look like me should be the ones who's leading it. Certainly there to support in all of our capacities, but that's not the place for us. And then personally, it's kind of like this dichotomy of the world I've created for myself, college and post, is a very diverse world. The world that I was raised in prior to that was not, which is great because now it lets me be able to go to that first half of my life and be able to kind of like share the things that I've learned and experienced. Because, I mean, so much of, I think, the well-intentioned people of the world is the lack of exposure. And I think if you're not intentional about it, then you're never going to get it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So we're about to start wrapping up soon. So one, if you have questions, please make sure you drop them in the chat. And if you have some rapid fire questions, please make sure you're getting prepared for that. So we want like awkward stuff. And make her awkward. This is gonna make her feel awkward on the cameras.
Oh no!
This is gonna live forever because we're gonna be around for a while. So you were just talking about the lessons that you learned in the spaces that you've been in. So I'm curious, what are some lessons that you've learned in athletics in your athletic journey?
One of the ones I was thinking about was that as an athlete, there's two parts to it. You get to always work on being a better athlete for yourself, and then also this idea of like making the sport better for other athletes and athletes who come after you. And I think that's been like a big shift in most sports now. Like when you think about like the female gymnasts and the women's soccer team, like we're seeing like that as an athlete, you also have like a unique charge to be able to change the thing that you love. So I think constantly trying to make things better for the other athletes around you, and then also just you can never do enough research for whatever you're doing. Whether it's like nutrition, races, teams, there's always more you can learn.
I love that. So I know we have a question in the chat, but just as a quick follow-up question, how do you see yourself making the sport, whatever sport it is that you love, better?
I think exposing it to more people.
How are you doing that? How are you exposing it to more people?
I think being in lots of communities where it's not a popular sport is one. It's so funny, like when you explain triathlon to people, and people are like, "Oh, that's cool." Like, yeah, it is, but nobody knows about it.
Right.
And I also think like bridging the gap between like triathlon being so white and upper middle class and trying to diversify that. It shouldn't be the job of the people who are not white and middle class to like bust into triathlon and be like, hello, like we get to be here. Like it should be everyone else's job to be inviting and welcoming. So sometimes I think that just looks like showing other people who look like me how to be an inclusive person. And then I think don't have a whole lot of money and power now, but one day when I do, using it for the greater good. But also I think like just pointing it out to people. I think white people have a tendency to be very ignorant to things that we don't, to the things around us. And I think so many people in triathlon are unaware of how white it is. So just pointing that out and like, doesn't this look interesting to you? Like, what do you notice? And just like getting those discussions going, because it's only going to be better the more diverse and inclusive we get.
I love that. That's like light bulbs for the world. So before we jump into our rapid fire, Danny, can you let us know what questions we have in the chat?
So we have several questions.
All right.
Jason wants to know, where is triathlon taking you next, and where do you want to take triathlon?
He's asking that because he wants me to commit to a full Ironman. It will take me to an Ironman one day. I'm not putting a date on it.
So you gotta change your Instagram then.
That's why, yeah, it came up the other day. He's like, Sarah tried 70.3, so is she gonna try 140.6?
Like, that's the reason I wore your shirt.
Yep. That's where it's taking me one day.
Yeah.
Maybe 2021, we'll see. And where am I taking it? I don't know. That's a great question.
That kind of goes back to the question that Joey asked, as far as like where you're planning to take it next and how you want to introduce it to the students that you're working with.
Yeah, I think something I've learned about myself is I make like a good wing woman, which means that it's not always like, I think while I would be able to like lead that, I think I also bring a lot to the table as like the person who supports someone doing those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So if anyone wants to start a tri team for kids, I'm a great wing woman. But yeah, like keeping those options open, keep growing networks to build that potential.
All right, cool. I know we have another question in the chat. Sorry.
We have several. What is your Dr. Sarah Waymert wants to know, what is your focus for 2020 given the pandemic?
Staying healthy and certainly getting strong. Sarah knows better than anybody that I'm super injury prone, and so she's helping me this year to make sure that I get stronger so that all of the endurance things that I want to do, my muscles are leading me there and not to my bones and my tendons.
So how is she helping you do that?
She has been leading twice weekly boot camp and strength training sessions outside, social distance, very responsible, and she's been like kicking our butts and getting us a lot stronger, which is really exciting because I think I was telling her last week that's like the first time I've ever felt my glutes actually fire while I run. She's been telling me for years, and I was like, I can't make them fire because I don't have any.
Alright, I love that. So twice a week, you said what days?
Thursdays, usually around 7 p.m. Sundays, usually around 8:30.
And
she's at Dr. Sarah Weimer, PT, I think.
Alright, and we'll make sure we drop this in the show notes with Sarah's approval, so folks can go out and join those, because I know people get a lot of great value. But I also know we have a few more questions before we jump into rapid fire.
So the rapid fire has begun in the
Alright.
chat. The chat's on fire. So I'm going to start the rapid fire in a way that's non-traditional.
Okay.
Mike usually starts it.
I'm like I got cards.
So,
I'm like, y'all ain't even got cards.
Maybe she's here.
Brittany wants to know, what's your favorite workout song right now?
WAP, and that's what
That's phenomenal. What's your favorite workout gadget?
Currently my Apple Watch, because it's getting paid off for free through my health insurance.
Clap for health insurance. But that battery life, though.
Oh, it's terrible.
We'll
I
talk
will be
about it
Garmin
later.
for life, but free.
Favorite post-workout meal?
Sundays it's donuts. Any other day it's ice cream.
How many toenails have you lost?
One, but the big one.
Do you have a bucket list for races?
I think it would be really cool to do Lake Placid one day, but I'm gonna have to do a lot more squats with Sarah before I can do those hills.
Follow-up questions to that. Do you have a favorite race distance?
Currently after Atlantic City, I'd say it's 70.3. It felt surprisingly better afterwards than a marathon. It's like it was twice as long, but yeah.
All right. And who is your favorite athlete? Current or?
Currently,
Yes.
probably because I was just watching the NBA. I would say Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Okay. Whatever. He's cool.
I know, sorry.
He's
I
so
don't
sorry.
Sorry, man.
I don't even want to talk about basketball right now. The Sixers just got swept. It's depressing.
We were having so much fun and
The chat is still asking questions. Excuse me.
Gosh.
Strongest muscle?
Did Sarah ask that question?
Probably.
Brittany.
Glute.
How many donuts do you eat after a peak week strength days?
Just one. But if
Will
it's a great week, maybe I'll go another day.
Will Riggs do a triathlon?
Riggs hates swimming, so probably not. But he has, he's been to some, and he's run before. He's run a race, he's run a 5K.
He's cheer squad, right?
Yes.
Favorite bike trail?
Oh, Anacostia. Farming.
Oh, me too. Favorite ice cream?
It's Graders out of Cincinnati. If you haven't had it, go to Wegmans and get it. And it's the black cherry chocolate chip.
I love it. I love it. And the last question that we always like to ask folks in the rapid fire, actually, no, taking a step back. Before I get to the last question, which is kiss, kill, marry. How do you define the perfect athlete?
Someone who constantly works on making themselves a better athlete and then constantly thinks about and works on how to make the sport better for other athletes.
I love that. And then the last question of the rapid fire. If you had to kiss one, kill one, marry one, what would it be and why?
This is going to be really different than it would have been like a year ago. I'm going to marry the bike.
Woo!
I know. Kiss the run and kill the swim because all the pools are closed.
Alright. That's alright.
I know, it would have been a lot different.
I know. COVID. It's just making you change your whole life.
It really did.
Alright. But again, thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. Thank you everybody that joined live. Thank you everybody that's watching this on YouTube later and listening on the podcast. Also, thank you to our partners, Urban Athletic Club, if you're here in the DC community. As I always remind y'all, and Brittany's probably going to laugh, we are not a club, but we are a community. And since we are here in DC, that is the only reason we have our bi-weekly workouts. So, if you're in the DC community, make sure you pop up and for bi-weekly bike rides, bi-weekly group runs. Also, shout out to the Athletic Brewing Company, non-alcoholic beers out of Connecticut. Definitely some great stuff. We're drinking them now. Who else? Shout out to Philly Bike Expo. There's not an expo this year because, well, there's not anything planned right now, but we're working on some stuff just because of COVID. But so stay tuned for that. And then last, some new folks. Daniel was supposed to pass me this, but gosh, we talked about this beforehand. We had a plan and everything. Shout out to Aftershocks. They just jumped on to become a partner. Actually, I would consider them more of a sponsor at this point. They gave us a bunch of headphones, not only for our leadership team, but for our community. So make sure you're staying tuned for some giveaways. These are like fresh out the box, so we're going to be giving away some Aftershocks here in the near future. And then also the folks that don't win the Aftershocks, you have the opportunity to get them 15% off. So just hit the link in our bio. Don't do it right now because it's not there. But if you're listening to this later, you can then hit the link in our bio or go to perfecttimemultisport.com. Also, if you're watching this now, don't go there now because the website is not published. We are doing this from the ground. So give us time. But yes, shout out to everybody that's here joining again and wanting to see us grow and be a part of this process. However, if you want to continue the conversation with Sarah, how do you do that?
Currently, Sarah tries 70.3 on Instagram. If you can't find it, that means at some point it got switched to Sarah tries 140.6. But it's pretty safe for the next 6 months.
That's fact. Again, if you want to follow me, Ship Happens 215. Danny.
MUN. I'll type it out.
All right.
It's Mundo Perfecto.
Yeah.
All right. So if you want to follow Danny, again, we are trying to make sure we continue building this community, and the reason we wanted to make sure we share our personal information is because we want you to know who we are. So if you want to work with us, make sure you know who we are first before you try to slide in our DMs to try to partner. We are very patient and intentional with that. But again, looking forward to releasing an episode next week. We will not be live, but we will be releasing an episode around the weekend around March on Black Lives weekend with two most recent Howard graduates. who are also swim captains for their team. That's really going to be dope, and I'm really excited to share what they have going on with Blackhead Swim. So yeah, stay tuned for that, and we're going to be announcing something else really cool at that episode next week. So look forward to seeing you all. Appreciate you all for being here, and let's keep growing together.